One and all. Hope everyone is safe during this pandemic. Welcome to 31st International Webinar of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College in association with MYRA School of Business, Mysuru, India, on global standards in library science. At the outset, I am happy to inform you all that our evening college is celebrating its Golden Jubilee this year. On behalf of our college, we congratulate all the stakeholders. Today's webinar is fully hosted by the students of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. I request everyone to kindly pardon us in any case of mistakes. I now request Sunil sir to play the video of our college.
Great journey begins with a small step. Proving this statement true, it all began in 1930 when two women educational enthusiasts took up a noble initiative. In the erstwhile posh locality of Seshadripuram, Srimati Anandamma and Srimati Seethamma started a primary school with 20 children. Now, Seshadripuram Educational Trust under its umbrella has 36 institutions. It all began with the educational visionary Sri K.M. Nanjappa, the then President of Seshadripuram Educational Trust. In 1971, which has been a landmark in the history of education for the working students by starting Seshadripuram Evening College.
Our college started with the primary objective of imparting formal education to the quality and needy. The college is affiliated to the Bengaluru Central University. Being in the heart of the city, it has an easy reach and connectivity. Its premises comprise of spacious building with good canteen, computerized library, business lab, browsing center, Wi-Fi facility, sports club, thus well equipped for all academic, sports, co-curricular like NSS, NCC, YRC, etc. and extracurricular activities throughout the year. The college organizes orientation program for freshers and guest lecturers to equip them.
As most of us are working in the morning and studying in an evening degree college, it is very facilitative for us to excel in our jobs. Even though we are studying in an evening degree college, we are being provided many state level and national level opportunities to express our talents. Also, many cultural activities are being conducted.
SEDC is engaged in various cultural activities throughout the year. There are numerous committees in the college that perform variedly on their behalf and have a lasting effect on the college, students, as well as outsiders.
Our evening degree college believes in the vision to ignite the minds of every student to identify and develop their inner strength, with the mission to promote holistic development of students by offering quality education and making them self-reliant and progressive.
Our college NCC cadets will visit every academic year in Officers Training Academy Chennai and INS Kadamba Naval Base at Karwar. It will motivate our college NCC cadets to join Indian Armed Forces.
He has had a 40-year career in public libraries in Australia and has held a number of roles in IFLA. She was president of ALIA and is a co-founder of the INELI Oceania program and the Pacific Libraries Network. She has served on state and national government advisory boards relating to libraries and has contributed to international organizations promoting technology and the internet. She has been a member of the Australian Government's Public Lending Rights Committee, the Library Board of Victoria's Advisory Committee on Public Libraries, the Victorian Government's Ministerial Advisory Council on Public Libraries, the executive of the Public Libraries Victoria Network, and a juror for the Intelligent Communities Forum. Due to technical issues, she is unable to join us today, but She has sent her inaugural video to us. In her absentia, ma'am, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I welcome you to this webinar. Now, I would like to introduce and welcome our first theme speaker, Catharina Isberg, IFLA Governing Board Member and IFLA Division Chair, Library Director at Helsingborg City Libraries, Sweden. Madam is a Library Director of Helsingborg City Libraries since 2013. Previously, she was Deputy Library Director and Library Manager of Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences from 2003 to 2013. She was a consultant from 2002 to 2003. She started her library path at Ferring Pharmaceuticals in different roles as Library Manager, Information Center Director, and VP Corporate Communication and Information between 1991 and 2002. She has been active in IFLA since 2011. She is an IFLA Governing Board Member and Chair of Division 4, Support of the Profession, and also member of the Congress Advisory Committee. She is part of the Management and Marketing Standing Committee and previously has been part of the Continuing Professional Development and Workplace Learning section as Information Coordinator, Chair or Co-Chair, and Secretary. In August 2018, CPDWL was the winner of the IFLA Dynamic Unit and Impact Award, which was received on behalf of the CPDWL Standing Committee by Catharina. During the last year, she has acted as governor and taken the lead on the work group of the coaching program, which is a CPDWL initiative with the support from the IFLA headquarters and IFLA professional committee. On a national level, Catharina is one of the 3 coordinators of the Swedish IFLA network and has previously been coordinating the Swedish network of public library directors. She fills various regional and national roles. From 2007 to 2010, she was chairing the Expert Committee on Skills Management, Royal Library of Sweden. From 2004 to 2008, she was a board member of the Swedish Association for Information Specialists. Ma'am, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I welcome you to this webinar. I am happy to introduce and welcome today's another theme speaker, Dr. Shalini, founder and chairperson, MYRA School of Business, Mysuru, India. Madam is an internationally recognized academic who began her career in the academia 44 years back, joining the University of Mysore as a lecturer in the Department of Library and Information Science in 1976. She is an institution builder whose brainchild is the MYRA School of Business, which was founded in 2012. She also founded the International School of Information Management and first information school in India as an autonomous constituent unit of the University of Mysore in 2005. She is currently involved with Guru India Foundation as a board member and is actively involved in the implementation of the Guru Learning Platform in India and building the Indian Learning Collective. She has served as a UNESCO expert on several occasions and was commissioned to conduct many studies in the last 20 years. Her contributions have won her several awards. She was a Fulbright scholar and a visiting professor at the Department of Computer Science, Virginia Tech, the USA during 2000 and 2001. An adjunct faculty at the International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore during 2005 to 2007, and a visiting professor at the Indian Statistical Institute, Bengaluru during 1998 and 1999. Passionate and dedicated to digital scholarship, she has led many digital initiatives in India. She pioneered the electronic thesis and dissertations movement in India in the year 2000 and won the Microsoft grant for implementing Unicode for Indian languages in 2003. She also won the Adobe Leadership Award in 2004. She conceptualized and developed the Vidyanidhi Digital Library and e-scholarship portal in the year 2000 with funding from the Government of India, which became a national initiative for further funding from the Ford Foundation. She built an online digital library way back in 2000, much before the digital era captured the imagination in India. Ma'am, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I wholeheartedly welcome you to this webinar. It is my proud privilege to introduce and welcome Shri W.D. Ashok Sir, Honorary Trustee of Seshadripuram Educational Trust. Sir holds a master's degree Sir holds a master's degree in pharmacy, specialized in the field of total parenteral nutrition. He served at the famous Al-Adin Hospital, Kuwait, for over 13 years. He is a trustee of the Seshadripuram Educational Trust. Sir is the backbone for all the events conducted in our evening degree college. On behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I welcome you, sir. Now, I welcome our beloved principal, Professor N.S. Satish, sir, to this international webinar. Welcome, sir. I welcome all the office bearers and trustees of Seshadripuram Educational Trust and all the principals of our sister institutions, other heads of the institutions, conveners, volunteers, and all participants who have registered across the globe. Now I welcome Dharappa Konnur sir, Program Coordinator, and Sunil Kumar ji sir, Coordinator, IQAC. I would also like to welcome Yoganand S.C. sir, Librarian of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. And finally, I welcome our own teaching and administrative faculty to this webinar. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Prerna. I now ask Madam Christine Mackenzie, the President, International Federation of Library Associations, is unable to join us because of some technical issues. Madam has sent us a pre-recorded inaugural address. Hence, I request Sunil sir to play the video.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, I am delighted to be part of the celebrations marking the Golden Jubilee of the Seshadripuram Evening Degree College in Bengaluru, which was established in 1971. And we share something in common. I started my arts degree in 1971. And so, a special hello to anyone who was a foundation student at the college who has joined us today. I'm Christine Mackenzie, the President of IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, and I am speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia. I would like to acknowledge Professor Satish, the Principal of the College, and also my friend and colleague, Catharina Isberg, who serves on the IFLA Governing Board with me. I also acknowledge Dr. Shalini and Dr. Uday Krishna, and of course Professor Dharappa Konnur, who has organised this seminar and who invited me to attend. The mission of your institution is impressive, offering higher education opportunities to the underprivileged and allowing them to study and work concurrently. And it is a tribute to everyone involved that you have reached this milestone. May you have many more years ahead to continue your important work. Before I talk about global standards in library science, I would like to introduce you to IFLA. IFLA is the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions and the global voice of libraries. It was founded in 1927 and has been based in The Hague, the Netherlands, since the 1970s. We have 1,500 members in 150 countries, and they're mainly associations and institutions, but we also have some personal members. The lifeblood of IFLA and the Library World's Brains Trust are the 60 professional units with 1,200 volunteers that provide the research, innovation and knowledge for library professionals and for the global library field. Every aspect of librarianship is represented in our professional units, and the people who participate are ensuring that libraries will continue to flourish into the future. A strong element of the professional units is developing guidelines, rules and standards for the profession. IFLA has two main roles. Firstly, advocating for libraries at the highest level, including at the United Nations, UNESCO and WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. And secondly, supporting the global library field. 4 years ago, IFLA started the Global Vision Project to develop a vision for the global library field going forward. Through workshops, meetings, and an online survey, every library worker, wherever they are in the world, has been able to participate. It has been the biggest and most comprehensive survey of libraries ever undertaken. Overwhelmingly, the most important key finding from the Global Vision discussion is the discovery that the library field is globally united in its goals. Across regions, library types, and length of engagement with libraries, there is a deep commitment to the enduring value and role of libraries. And the number one highlight is that we are dedicated to equal and free access to information and knowledge. Across the library field, no value was more highly rated than a commitment to equal and free access to information and knowledge. The findings are in the Global Vision Report summary available on the IFLA website. And from all the input we received, there are 10 highlights and 10 opportunities. The opportunities arise from the challenges libraries face, because it is important to understand where we as librarians need to put our knowledge and innovation to improve and promote the work of libraries. My background, like Catharina's, is in public libraries. So the work I did relied on the expertise and knowledge of librarians with very different skill sets from me, and who have the ability to recognise how important standards are to the acquisition, description, and accessibility of information. IFLA has a committee on standards, which coordinates the work done by our professional units on guidelines and standards. And it also has the Linked Data Technical Subcommittee reporting to it. In June 2020, we published the IFLA namespaces, and I was pleased to be on the board when we agreed to progress this project. It was developed by IFLA's Committee on Standards and Linked Data Technical Subcommittee. The purpose of the subcommittee is to support the linked data and namespaces activities of IFLA's professional units by assisting in the publishing of standards and in providing training and support to these activities. The namespace website allows for linked data access to various IFLA standards and supports the representation of IFLA standards in formats suitable for use in the semantic web. And so you can see that IFLA is taking a global role in this important work, and you can find out more about it on the IFLA website. My presidential theme is let's work together. We have to work together. We can't have fragmented responses, and we need to amplify the voice of libraries. We must work together at all levels, whether that is at your college, your library, between libraries, library associations, and in the wider environment. We must align ourselves with like-minded organisations to achieve our common goals. IFLA is holding an extraordinary General Assembly on the 12th of February to vote on a new structure for IFLA that establishes a regional council to help IFLA be more inclusive and representative. We want to make IFLA truly global and inclusive, and we look forward to increased participation by Indian libraries and library associations in our global vision of a strong and united library field. Best wishes to you all. Stay safe and well, and I wish you success in all your endeavours, and congratulations again on this Golden Jubilee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, for the inaugural address. May I now request first theme speaker, Catharina Isberg, IFLA Governing Board Member and IFLA Division Chair, Library Director, Helsingborg City Libraries, Sweden, to enlighten us on the topic of global standards and strategies in daily library. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation to this important Jubilee. And thanks for being able to be part of your celebration of the important work that you are doing and the important institution that you are celebrating. So congratulations to you all for this Jubilee. My name is Catharina Isberg. I'm a library director in Helsingborg in Sweden. And when I got this invitation, I was thinking, I can't speak on global standards. But then when I started to look into it, this is something that we are all really affected of in our daily business, in our library business. And I would like to broaden it a little bit and talk on global standards and strategies, because they are of great importance in our work. But first, I'm working in Helsingborg. It is the number 8 city in Sweden. It has almost 150,000 inhabitants. As you can see, the cities in Sweden, we don't have that many inhabitants as you have in Indian cities. We are situated in the south of the country, close to Denmark. And actually, I can see Denmark from on the other side of the sound from my office window. We have a digital library, we have a main library, we have 9 library branches and a library bus. And we organize our work according to what you are working with instead of where you are working. So we have 4 departments, one for reading, one for the digital divide, which we call search, one for the library as a meeting place, and one for the digital library and all of our collections. And we also have a strong collaboration with a common joint library system and library collection with 11 cities in the northwestern part of Scania, the region where I work. So this is where I work in my daily business. Our library vision in the daily work is to give everyone free access to information and knowledge, create inspiring meeting places, work to promote reading, and work with digital inclusion. So there are 4 parts of our work. And this also ties back to the organization that we have of the work. And why we are doing this is to secure freedom of opinion and expression and the participation in the democratic society. Libraries is an essential service in the democratic infrastructure. And the freedom of opinion and expression and the access to information and knowledge, that's something that Christine Mackenzie also mentioned in her speech. In the work, I strongly believe that the global ties to the local. We have the global vision, the IFLA global vision, which Christine Mackenzie talked about. We have the UN Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. We have different global library standards. We have different global manifestos, etc. And on the national level in Sweden, we have a library law, and we also have a national library strategy, and those ties to the international ones. And on the regional level, We have a regional library program, and we have local policies and strategies. And those also ties to the global and the national field. And then when we come to the local, we have a local library plan, a local library program. And there is this line back to the global part. But nothing of this matters if we don't get it into action. So all the activities and all the action that we are doing in our library on the daily business, that is of importance. And we wouldn't be able to do any of those if we didn't have the global field. And I would just like to shortly mention the UN Agenda 2030, because there is a really important that the library look into all of the different 17 goals in this and ties the business to these. And IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations, has a lot of material on this, which you can use on your local work. And they have actually looked into all of the different goals, looking into, but what can the library do to progress this? And if you, for example, look at the number 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. We are in a pandemic, we are in a serious situation, and there the library can ensure public access to health and wellness information, for example. That's one way of tying your local work to the global. And there are 17 of these, and one of the most important ones is the number 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. And here you can see both the meeting place that I said is one of our issues in our library mission, to have neutral and welcoming spaces. That's a meeting place for the library. And also give access to information, equal access to information that supports social, political, and economic inclusion. That is really key in the library business. So I think it's important for us to tie our daily work into these. Christine Mackenzie also talked a little bit about the global vision, the IFLA global vision. And this is also something to tie the local work to, because the vision is to have a strong and united library field, powering literate, informed, and participative societies. And that is actually what we are doing every day. And it feels great to see that what you're doing locally is also something that is happening in all of the world. And I usually use the global vision when I give a presentation, because you have the 10 highlights and you have the opportunities. And you can always pick some of those that apply to the subject that you are covering. For example, the highlight number 2, we as libraries remain deeply committed to supporting literacy, learning, and reading. And the opportunity there is that we must update our traditional roles in the digital age. And one way of doing so is actually to have a look what kind of standards and strategies are there on the global and the national arena, so that you can connect your work into those. There are a huge amount of IFLA standards, and Christine Mackenzie, she talked a little bit about those, and I will show you a couple of them. There is on this link, there is a list of all the revised and updated standards. And the good thing here is that they are internationally reviewed, they are regularly updated, and they are published. And the IFLA standards, they reflect current consensus on rules, principles, guidelines, and best practices or models for a particular activity or service. And this is something that we really can use in the local work. And the list is much longer, but here are some of them. And for example, we all are dependent on the interlibrary loan and document delivery. And that is something that is tying us together on the global field. And there is a lot of things to find in the guidelines for best practices for this work. The guidelines for children's library services. For example, last year at my library, we were working a lot with the Convention of Children and the target group of children. And we wanted to look into what kind of skills do we need in order to develop our children library skills. And in this guideline, you can, for example, find a list of skills for children librarians. So we could connect our work to the global. And then also the guidelines for continuing professional development, principles and best practices. There is a lot of ideas on how to work more structural with your professional development, because professional development is something that we all need to do in our daily work. And as you can see, there are a lot of more guidelines, so just have a look at them. A couple of years ago, the Swedish Library Association made a really great work on different library manifestos, and they translated them into Swedish. And there is a link here provided with this document, unfortunately in Swedish, but you can always use Google Translate to translate it. But some examples that you can find here is the IFLA UNESCO Public Library Manifesto. There is the Digital Library Manifesto, and also the Multicultural Library Manifesto, the School Library Manifesto, and so on. And this is also something to look into and to use in the daily work. For example, for when you are developing your digital library, it's great to see what it looks like in this manifesto. Also, the Swedish Library Association did a work a couple of years ago when it comes to media, to our collections at the library. And they tied them together with different international library manifestos. And this booklet is in English, because this was needed, because there was a big discussion in Sweden when it comes to what kind of information should the library provide. Are there information that we shouldn't provide? And the researchers that were doing this report, they looked into what does the international library standards and manifestos say about this. And free access to information, knowledge, and culture, that is really something that we need to continue to give. And we need to tie it together with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, and the right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas. So from my point of view, we really use the global into the national, into the regional, and into the local field, and everything is connected. And the libraries wouldn't be libraries without the system that we have in metadata and bibliographic records for our collections. And those all builds on the global standards. Because at our library, we give access to our collection, our books, in different formats, and our journals in different formats. We give access to technology, computers, for example, but also some robots. And here is a collection of our robots, which we are using in different activities with all ages. And we also give access to the librarians, the skills that the librarians has. For example, the skills when it comes to media and information literacy, where we can prevent the digital divide and ensure that everyone has access to the digital information field. And in our work, we will ensure and continue to ensure free access to information and knowledge for everyone. And that is actually something that all of the library business globally needs to continue to do. So once again, thanks for the invitation to this webinar, and congratulations to you all to your Jubilee.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful theme address. I now would request our next theme speaker, Dr. Shalini Aras, founder and chairperson, MYRA School of Business, Mysuru, to enlighten us on the topic of metadata standards for digital libraries. Over to you, madam.
Okay, thank you. Once again, thank you so much to all the organizers. My special thanks to Professor Satish and Professor Ashok and of course Standard, who invited me to be part of this event. And also I would like to welcome and thank Catharina Isberg for giving such a nice, wonderful, I would say, setting. Okay, before that, of course, Christina also set the goals of libraries. So it's a very nice, I would say, context, and I would say set the big picture for global standards for libraries in general. Whereas my own talk will be more specific to standards, or particularly metadata standards for digital libraries. Let me try and share my screen and see how it. So despite all the testing, it is sometimes called the Murphy's Law, right? If things can go wrong, it will. Hopefully it will get corrected. I had even kept my slides open. Anyway, let me give a little bit of an introduction about why I have chosen to speak primarily about metadata standards for digital libraries, okay, before showing my slides. I hope they do open now. It's trying to open now. Anyway, so before that, why I chose to speak about metadata standards for digital libraries is, as I was introduced, I have been working primarily in the space of digital libraries for the last 20 and odd years. Okay, so it did open up. Let me see whether you can see my slides. Can you see my slides?
No, ma'am.
No?
No.
I can see my slides. How is that I am seeing slides? Okay, I think it's finally opening.
Yes, madam. Now we can see.
Now you are able to see, right? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
There always has to be some hiccups. Okay. So as I was talking about, see, I have my own experience as far as the practical side of libraries is concerned is in the context of digital libraries, because as you probably know by this time through the introduction, I have been an academic who is teaching library and information science, and particularly information management and digital libraries for the last 40 and odd years. So now today, I chose to speak about metadata standards for digital libraries, primarily because, as I said, that is where my experience and expertise lies. Now let us try to understand, because I know that our audience consists of not just the library information science professionals, but also general students community and academic community. So let me start with some basic introduction to why this metadata standards are important in the context of digital libraries. So let us try to understand metadata. I'm sure all the participants, everybody can see this particular image. All of you are seeing this image and you are making your own, I would say, guesses or assumptions about what this is. Of course, as human beings, all of you can make out that this is actually a pair of glasses or spectacles. For human beings, it's very simple. At least we can see that it is a pair of glasses. But when it comes to digital libraries or in the context of internet in general, I would say it's not enough that these things are human readable. These objects, digital objects, in this case it's an image, the image also has to be machine readable. In order to make an image or any digital object, whether it's an image or whether it is some symbol or some text or some video or what have you, audio, etc., what have you, that has to be both machine readable as well as human readable in some form or the other. Now, when you look at this image, as I said, human beings can recognize that this is a pair of glasses. But beyond that, I'm sure most of you will not be able to recognize what it is. What is the context? Whose glasses are this? Why am I showing this here? As I said, glasses, well, human beings can easily identify, but machines can't. Now, what is this? This was the, I'm sorry about that, it should have been Mahatma Gandhi, but the A has come this side. In my own slide, it was looking fine. So this was the pair of glasses that belonged to the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. That I'm sure many of you did not think about, or at least did not recognize. That's another data point about this particular image, that this belonged to Mahatma Gandhi. And another data point is this was auctioned in 2020. And you have any idea how much it fetched? It fetched British pound sterling of 260,000 pounds. That is the amount that someone paid for this pair of glasses. And this was auctioned by an auctioneer or auction house called East Westall Auctions. That is the name of the auction house. Now, and this was a pair of glasses owned by Gandhi in South Africa when he was in South Africa. Somewhere during the period of 1910 and 1930, it is supposed to have been given by Mahatma Gandhi to one person in South Africa. Mahatma Gandhi was having this habit of, giving his glasses to some of his co-workers, colleagues, and others. So this was given to the seller's uncle, the person who sold it in 2020 to an auction house. Well, his uncle had got these glasses. And you know what? He had no clue as to the value of this, how much money these glasses would fetch. He had no idea. He'd left it in the letterbox of the auctioneers with a saying that this is supposed to have belonged to Mahatma Gandhi and given to my uncle. It was with me. If it fetches any money, please help me and then call me. That was a note that he had sent, left. Now the auctioneer, they did the authenticity of the glasses, everything was done, and they were able to sell it sometime in August 2020 for an incredible amount of £260,000. And this is an incredible item belonging to a man with few earthly possessions. As all of you, at least the Indians, so most of the world knows that Mahatma Gandhi had no earthly possession. Well, why am I giving this example? This is to drive home the importance of metadata. The data here is an image of a pair of glasses, and I have added, there are so much more data about it. I've just added some interesting facts about this particular digital object of a pair of glasses. So it describes, for example, glasses, when I say, well, it describes the class of things that it belongs to. When I say Mahatma Gandhi, it says that the provenance of it, who had this, and then it also says something about who auctioned it, for how much money, who's the auctioneer, auction house, and what is the provenance of this, when did Gandhi wear this, and when was it given to the seller of this. All of that is metadata. Metadata, it could be much more. I've just given you a small set of what can be called as metadata for this particular item, that is a pair of glasses. I suppose this drives home the point of what is metadata. So metadata, there are many, many definitions if you look at it, but the simplest definition is this: data about data. So metadata is nothing but data about data. Now, next, let us dissect this definition. It's a simple definition consisting of only 3 words: data about data. But let us dissect this definition. In other words, what it means is metadata is also data, right? It's data about data. It's data. It is pieces of information that have some meaning in relation to another piece of information. Whatever you saw in my previous slide, these are all pieces of information. Glasses, Mahatma Gandhi, auction for this amount, won between 2010 and 30 in South Africa. All these are pieces of information that have some relation, some meaning, some relation to this piece of information, that is data. That is, which is the data here? Here the pair of glasses. And we know I created all of that. That is the metadata about who wore it, when was it worn, whom it belonged to as a property. It belonged to Gandhi, of course, but since he gave it away to somebody in South Africa, and that person actually gifted it to his nephew or somebody, etc. So that's the provenance data. It can be, so metadata, in other words, can be created, managed, stored, and preserved like any other piece of data. That is what metadata is. And another important thing is, metadata can be applied to anything. Just now what I showed was an example of a metadata for one digital object, which was a picture or an image of a pair of glasses. But metadata is applied to a computer file. Let us say you have created a computer file. It could be a program, it could be anything. That file, you are going to describe that. Normally when you create any document, for example, all of you are familiar with creating at least a document file. I mean, I'm sure all students would have created some doc file or the other, right? To submit your assignment, to create something. You know that automatically the software itself, if in case you are using, let us say, Microsoft Word, or if you are using, for example, Google Doc, it is automatically creating metadata, such as when was it created, which computer. It doesn't say which name exactly, but at least it will say, for example, if I have created this file, which computer I have used, which software I have used. Some of it is already automatically created by the system itself. So a computer file can be described, such as if you open your file, I'm sure many of you would have done that, right? File info. If you open your file, you will see that there are lots of metadata relating to that. When was it last modified, and all of that. What is the file size, for example, all of that. All of that is metadata. So it is not necessary that it refers to a document. It is not necessary that it refers only to, let us say, an image. It could refer to anything for that matter. It could refer to a file. It could refer to a program. It could refer to, as I said, image, video, etc. And it could also refer to just a piece of information itself. It doesn't have to be to a resource. If you have noticed, while using Word or any of these software, when you write a date, for example, it automatically asks you such questions. That is, they are called actually smart tags. Because the moment you type a date, it recognizes the file format as a date, and it wants to actually store that as a date file, or a date data rather, not file, date data. So what I'm trying to say here is that a metadata could be to a resource, could be a file, it could be for anything, okay? So it can have, such as whether you are describing a file, whether you are describing an image, whether you are describing just one data also. It can have a title, an author, and a year created. As I said, Word does that. Now, the thing here is metadata adds value to other information, but isn't in itself valuable. That is, say, for example, when you look at that image of the Gandhi's glasses, you will see that when it is disconnected from the data that it is describing, in itself it has no value. It has value only when it is actually added to the data that it is describing. Of course, there are some exceptions to this rule. I will not get into that for want of time. Now, many people, particularly in the library and information science profession, think that it is like creating metadata is like cataloging. Many of you might be familiar with this concept of cataloging. That is, cataloging is nothing but preparing a list of items, list of books in your collection, or let us say any inventory. Okay, when you make an inventory, some accession register, right? Your inventory, you are making an inventory of items. See, any stock register, I suppose many of you are at least familiar with the stock register. That's also a list. So list of items is nothing but the process of creating a list of items is called cataloging. And in the library context, it is list of books and other documents in the library collection. So many people in the LIS profession think that it is almost like cataloging. True, it is like cataloging, but I want to drive home the point that it is more than cataloging. It's much broader and it is more fine-grained than cataloging. That is, when you make a list of stock register or whatever, let us say you have a stock register. You give a number and you say when it was acquired, what that item is. You might say it's, let us say you have a stock register of your equipment in the library, equipment in the college, or your furniture in the college, right? So you say a table. Maybe you might give a description of the table. It's a wooden table or a metal table, etc., etc. And then when it was acquired, how much money you have paid for that, from which vendor you got it. Some of these are the metadata relating to that table in your stock register. So that is like a cataloging. But then metadata is much more broader and fine-grained than cataloging. I'll come to that, what it is. So it covers more than just a resource or an item. Can be as fine-grained as data about every word in a document. When you get to the fine, if you want to, I'm saying, each word in your document, let's say you create a document file, each word in your document can be having its own metadata. Say something like this. Let us say the 5th line, 7th word in the 5th line of page 1. That could be the metadata that your document creates for that particular term, which is the 7th word in the 5th line of page X. So it can go to that level of granularity. That's the point I'm saying. So most metadata is created, of course, using the fundamental cataloging principles, but outside of libraries. So basically, metadata is one view of a resource. And then that's not recourse, it's resource. And the resource itself be part of another resource. For example, an image in a document or a database. For example, if you have an image in a document, that itself could be another data point. So it's essential for any digital library project. The point I'm trying to drive home here is that in a digital library scenario, particularly, each and every item or sub-item, as I said, an image within a document itself could be a point or a data which needs to be cataloged, which needs to be metadata created. So basically what we are doing in metadata creation is using library principles to new environments and newer contexts. So it is both machine and human readable. There are, you can look at, there are different people who classify the types of metadata and different things, but I have chosen to take only these three. This one classification of metadata, what is called as descriptive metadata, structural metadata, and administrative metadata. So descriptive metadata is data about the content and the context of your data. Like, for example, which is commonly used in the context of a library would be, or any document would be, title, creator, subject, keywords, and such. See, normally I say this because most of you, I assume that many of the audience are students. You create a document in Word, and then many students make this mistake. They don't save it properly. So automatically the computer saves, and it comes out as document number something. Or even if somebody saves it, they will save it as assignment number 1. Well, you are not creating appropriate metadata. So you create a proper title. If it is an assignment in this particular, let us say in your e-commerce course or in your biology or botany or whatever it is, you have to put that title properly. And then you also attach, for example, usually it's better to attach your name or something to the title itself, or file name I'm talking about, so that when you send it to your teacher, your lecturer or professor, the professor can easily identify that this is an assignment submitted by this student. I share this, my problem with students all the time, saying that all of you send your assignment, saying that assignment number 1 or number 10 or whatever, and all of them will have the same assignment. How do I know whose assignment it is? So that is the importance of metadata, even when you are creating. So descriptive metadata, title, creator, subject, keywords, and such. Then the second type is the structural metadata, which describes the physical structure of compound data. In the context of digital objects, it's important. For example, as I said many times, some of these things are automatically created. When you take a photo, for example, when you take a photo, it shows which camera or which phone, etc., which is the file format, and then what is the relation to that data. In fact, today the smartphones are so smart that everything is already, metadata is created. And you cannot cheat also. You cannot say that this was created. You cannot say that I am here when you are actually not in, let us say, Bengaluru or Mysuru or somewhere, right? So that is automatically created. So anyway, structural metadata is about various things, hardware and software that are necessary for that particular document. Then the other one is what is the third type is called the administrative metadata. Administrative metadata is data used for managing your data. When and how it was created, who can access it. For example, whether you want to give access to everybody or limited access, what software to use, how do you open this file, okay? As I said again, many times, automatically the system asks you which application software to use, but it's always good to actually describe it, particularly from a long-term perspective, which software to use, what are the copyright permissions, etc., that needs to be added. So these are the three types of metadata. Now, I'm sure students particularly, and many of you are thinking, why am I breaking my head and wasting my breath so much on metadata? It's all done automatically sometimes it is not done. What's the big deal if my name is not given to my assignment? Now remember, metadata is very important because you are able to find data and use the data, preserve the data, as well as reuse the data. From a teacher perspective, I would have downloaded all the assignments given by my students, and then they are there. Then I have to open the file in order to see. Sometimes even then I wouldn't know whose assignment it is, right? So how do I find whose assignment? You keep saying, then I'll say, please resend it, etc. So, this is just a very, I would say, tip of the iceberg kind of a problem statement I'm making, why metadata is important. Metadata makes it much easier to find your relevant file, resource, data, etc. So findability of a resource, findability of a document, findability of a file, or findability of data is enhanced 100 times, n number of times, once the proper metadata is created. And second is using data. You can use the data. Supposing, let us say you have data sets. In order to use the data set, the proper metadata is also important. Similarly, reusing data, because we are talking about, for example, when I talk about reusing data, let me give you another example. Let us say you have done some survey. You may be undergrad students, let us say you have done a survey. Now, the survey data is there with you. That survey data, primary data that you have collected for part of your survey, well, that data probably needs to be reused by yourself or by somebody else later on. Let us say you have collected the survey data of attitude of students to online learning. Because of COVID, you have done some survey and then think, okay, let me do a survey of what is the attitude and how they have adjusted to the online environment today. You would have done it. Let us say you have collected the data of some 500 representative sample and got that data. Let us say 2 years down the line, someone else wants to do a survey. They do a survey and they have another 500 of the same region, same etc. Let us say. Same Seshadripuram college. Now this data and that data needs to be looked at, compared, and then seen in order to make fresh insights, to get fresh insight. That is what is called as reusing the data. In order to reuse the data needs proper metadata. That's the importance of metadata. Now I come to the most important aspect of my talk, that is the standardization, global standards for metadata. So to be more useful, metadata not only needs to be created, but it has to fall in line with a global standard. So a key component of metadata is the schema that is used. Okay. Just to give you one example, which everyone understands, okay, about the schema part of it. All of us are familiar with a date, right? We all use date format, correct? So in India, the date format that we use is day, month, and the year, right? So day, month, and year. Usually what happens, that is, we assume that is the global standard. But it is not necessarily the global standard. In the US, the format is month, day, and then year. Okay. So you understand how it can create problems. Many times it has created problems individually. I think my day, for example, a particular thing is valid if it is done in the US till November, but that 11 refers to actually the day, that is 11th. All of us know, right? So 11th is the day, and 9/11, everybody is familiar, right? So how that creates? So standardization, it's not just the data as data, metadata, but also standardization is important. So a key component of metadata is the schema that we use. So metadata schemas, they actually give an overall structure for the metadata, how the metadata is set up. And these schemas usually are both general, there are general schemas that are available, and there are discipline or what I call a specialized schemas that are available. So when it comes to metadata standards for digital libraries, normally, I'm not too sure how many of you are familiar with markup languages, but XML is the markup language or the de facto standard for metadata descriptions on the internet and digital libraries. I suppose at least all of you are familiar that the internet, the pages that you see on the internet, the web pages, they are all generally HTML pages. XML is a next, I would say, much more structured. I mean, all are markup languages. HTML is a markup language. XML is extendable markup language, which is a markup language which actually puts structure to the data that is already there. So that's why it is one of the de facto standard for metadata descriptions here. So I'll quickly go through this. This is the minimum set of metadata that you need. Title, name, okay? Description, format, metadata, identifier, rights holder, who holds the right. For example, I showed a picture, but actually the rights holder of that picture is now is the auction house, which has actually auctioned the glasses of Mahatma Gandhi. So rights holder, who holds the rights? What is about? Is it, some of you might have heard of copyrights, right? Copyrights is who holds the rights to the copy of that document or copy of that image, etc. And then contact information. So these are some of the minimum metadata standards. If you are familiar with the library catalog, you will see that this is the standard library catalog. So you will see that it is kind of similar to the metadata standards. So I've tried to give some examples of how this would look like in a HTML or an XML file. This is a HTML, or actually this is an XML file, okay? Metadata for a monograph in XML. Now coming to, as I said earlier, there are two types, general and specialized discipline specific. MARC is one of them. Dublin Core is the more commonly used one. And then there is this MARS, that is Metadata Object Description Scheme. So these are some of the standards that are available. How am I doing on time, Professor Satish? I think I will...
You can take another 10 minutes, madam. No issue. It's very interesting.
Is that okay? Are you
Yes,
sure? Okay.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. It's very interesting.
So MARC and Dublin Core and then Metadata Object Description Schema. These are some of the general metadata standards that are used. And then there are specialized metadata schemas. As I was telling you, it's not just for a record or a resource. For example, Darwin Core. There is a metadata standard called Darwin Core, which is meant for describing biological specimens. So biology students, you can think of actually using a standard description for your biological specimens using something called the Darwin Core. And then for ecological data, you have, this is just example. Like this, there are hundreds of such specialized metadata standards. NASA has its own standards. These are some examples that I've tried to put here. So this is the comparison between MARC, those from the library community. MARC is very familiar. Okay, MARC is from the Library of Congress. So it's one example. MARC is also from the Library of Congress. DC stands for Dublin Core. Okay, as you can see, the record format in case of MARC is a binary one, whereas in case of MARC and DC it is XML and others. So that's why they have moved on to the internet or the digital library field. And then fields label, each one has a label, whereas in case of MARC, it is numeric label. Again, library professionals are very familiar with MARC labels, but for MARCs and Dublin Core, they are text. So, and then ASCR is Anglo-American cataloging rules, which is one of the cataloging rules that is used, a code that is used in library information sciences for cataloging purposes. So MARC has a strong reliance on ASCR, while MARCs it only implies that, but not, there is no strong resemblance. So basically, common method of creation of this is MARC is created by library professionals, whereas MARCs is created by specialists and by derivation meaning from existing one, and by specialists and novices in the case of Dublin Core. Now, since Dublin Core is one of the most popular, most commonly used one, and more simpler also, I have just given you an example of Dublin Core. This is Dublin Core has a minimum, that is what is called as a 15 element set. And it is across all domains, that is all knowledge domains, and no element is required. It means that you don't have to have a particular element, that is Dublin Core element. You can repeat the elements, you can extend it, etc. So these are title, creator, subject, description, publisher, contributor, etc., etc. I will not enumerate all that which is there in the slide. What I have given you here is Dublin Core for electronic thesis and dissertations. As I told you, my own experience in digital libraries is primarily in the area of creating a digital library of thesis and dissertations. I developed a Vidyanidhi digital library project. Had a digital library, Vidyanidhi digital library project in the year 2000, and I was involved with the development of the Dublin Core standards for they are called as ETDs, electronic thesis and dissertations. I was in the US in the year 2000 and 2001, and that was the time when Dublin Core, the organization behind Dublin Core is what is called as the OCLC. So I was part of the committee. So you can see here that Dublin Core label is given in the below one. Now this is an example from my own Vidyanidhi Digital Library project where I have tried to give, for example, this is an XML file. An XML file which describes, for example, I have taken only a minimum set: title, author, contributor, subject, language, university, and date. That's all the elements that I have taken for the purpose of my project, Vidyanidhi. Okay, I thought let us begin with. So that's why it's called the thesis info, because I was only cataloging, or rather creating a metadata for the thesis. So this is the XML document. You can see here, this is just one record. Okay, creation of this record, content that is given, and this is the metadata for the same. And this is how, this is that is all behind the screen. Behind the screen meaning it is stored in that format, XML format, and then we use a XML style sheet. Using that, you get a display in this format. Okay, so display is in this format. So this is one example of how Dublin Core metadata minimum set was used to create metadata for thesis details. Okay, so this is the same. So descriptive metadata, since it is global standards, I will not only talk about what I have done, but also what is normally done. As I said, one is a MARC. MARC XML is one of them. So this, why MARC XML is because already, MARC is by Library of Congress. If some of you may not know, Library of Congress is one of the largest, I shouldn't say one of the largest, I should say it is the largest library in the world. How large it is, I'll just give you one example. If at all any one of you has written a book, any book in any language, you go to the Library of Congress, 99.99% chance you will find that book in the Library of Congress. Because their mission is to acquire and catalog and make it available any worthwhile book or document produced anywhere in the world in any of the languages. So you can imagine what kind of the collection of Library of, what is the level or the collection, how large the collection of the Library of Congress is. Any document required. So that's, we all say, we are great, everything. Today it's very common to say we are very great. But remember, greatness of any nation comes from variety of factors, and greatness of a nation such as whether it is USA or it also comes from a library, wherein you can think of finding the book that you want written anywhere in the world, in any language of the world, in your de facto national library. So the point here is, because of their acquisition policy, they have a huge collection. So they didn't want to actually sort of lose this rich descriptive records, which are already available in MARC for their collection. So they used it and then migrated it to the XML environment and called it MARC XML. That's what I wanted to add. So it provides continuity with the current data and flexible transition options. So MARC XML record, exact equivalent of the MARC record, but then it also provides a conversion from MARC 21 to others. Okay. Now, I already mentioned about MODS, that is Metadata Object Description Schema. It's an XML descriptive metadata standard, a derivative of MARC, which is used for all digital objects in the Library of Congress. So that's a standard, MODS standard. So that provides actually continuity for the digital libraries. Okay. So it is an extension schema. It represents metadata for harvesting in what is called as OAI, that is open access. Basically, the idea here is, when you create documents, when you create metadata for this digital object, it should be possible for anyone to be able to harvest that data. Okay. So harvesting the data, in order to be able to harvest that data, the metadata has to be, as I said earlier, a standard one, adhere to a standard one. So here, it actually adheres to a standard one. Okay. So this is the high level elements of the MODS schema, which I will not go into the details. Okay. This is again another one. I'll just skip some of these things. How MARC 21 evolved into XML. So there is one more standard called the premise, because we are looking at not just today's or tomorrow's, but we are looking at storing. Particularly, one of the problems with digital objects is, because of the change in technology, we need to preserve it for posterity. So for that reason, the Library of Congress has also come up with what is called as the premise. That is primarily a metadata standard for preserving documents or preserving metadata. So premise provides for this, what is called as a data dictionary. This is just an example of the data dictionary. Okay. So that's why it's called the preservation metadata. You can see here in this slide, preservation metadata, they're looking at not just today, not just for 10 years or 50 years, but they're looking at forever. Okay. So that's why it is called the preservation metadata. So basically, you need to look at provenance, that is, who has had custody or ownership of the digital object. That is, before today, let us say today I have custody of that digital object. But before me, who had it? Before me, who had? It's like that you are, any record, right? For example, some of you might be familiar with, let us say, land records. Today, I may be the owner of this land or this site, but it will have to have a history of before me, who owned it? Before that, who? From starting till now, who is the owner of that? Similar to that, you have for digital objects also what is called as the provenance. Okay, who was the owner of this? Okay, authenticity. Okay, is it authentic or not? So all of these things are very important in case of preservation metadata. So basically, we have looked at metadata standards, global standards for digital objects, especially looking at Dublin Core, looking at MODS, and looking at premise, but primarily focusing more on to understanding what is metadata and how do we do that in Dublin Core, and how I just gave you an example of Dublin Core metadata for thesis and dissertation, one type of a topic. So I'll conclude with this, what we call as the 5 C's of metadata standards: consistency, coherence, content, context, and conformation. So because the idea here is, remember, metadata should help you discover, classify, describe, archive, and control and manage data. So what are the best practices? What are some tips for practices? The important thing is, particularly in India, we are known not to write down things. We are very poor at documentation. So it's important to develop some written documentation for what has happened. Okay. Now, workflow. How do you start? Where it starts? What are the processes in like a flow chart? Some of you may be familiar with the flow chart, right? Workflow is like that. Have a flow chart of what happened at what stage. Then important thing is publish your findings. You have to share your experience, practice with others. So that is when, when you share it, people will be able to say, okay, this is how these people created that metadata for this particular type of an object. So this is my last slide. I just want to leave you with this thought that metadata is important. Creation of metadata is critical for long-term preservation of data, for findability of data, for discovery of data. And it's important that all of us, because as I said, this is not just for the library community, for all of us in small little ways. If you are a student, how do you think of creating metadata for your own files? You think about that and then try to adopt this. So consistently follow that, and then there should be some coherence, there should be content, there should be context and conformance to some standard. Conformance refers to follow some standard. I started with file naming, right? How do you name? There are file naming standards too. Follow some standards in naming your files. So with this, I conclude and thank you. Thank each one of you, organizers, as well as, of course, the participants. I hope I made some points clear about the importance of metadata. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for your words of expertise. Now the floor is open for interaction. As we are running out of time, we take up only a few questions which we have received in the chat box. I request Sunil sir to moderate the interaction session.
Thank you, Manvita. Ma'am, I have very limited time to ask. Shall I go through with the question, ma'am?
Yeah.
Ma'am, does metadata resemble search engine in library, ma'am?
Metadata doesn't resemble search engine. Metadata helps in discovery, as I said. No, so search engine, for example, let us say search engine like Google, they are able to perform better because of course, there's a whole lot of algorithm behind it, but at least the minimum thing, you see the web pages, remember I was talking about web pages, each HTML has its own metadata tags, okay? That meta tags and some of the things that people, while creating a web page, they follow, that enables in the search engine or the finding a good one. And Google has its own, as I said, algorithms wherein it will look at co-occurrence of terms. It will also look at ranking the pages based on from the authenticity. Authenticity meaning, for example, I'm just giving one hypothetical example. Let us say there are two files, which are two pages, which are equally good in every respect. One comes from Stanford and another one comes from some other not so well-known, unheard of university. So Stanford will come first. Why? Because Stanford has a higher ranking in general. Okay. So search engine, in a way, metadata helps search engine to discover pages and throw the results.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Over to Manvita.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for answering the questions of the participants. A small announcement before presidential remarks. We will send the feedback form link now in the chat box as well as to your registered mail, which will be active for the next 48 hours. Kindly fill the same and send back for e-certificate. The e-certificate will reach you from 7 to 10 days. Very shortly, we will meet in one more international webinar of our evening college, that is on 19th February 2021. Now I request Sri Ashok Sir, Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust, to render the presidential remarks.
Good evening, one and all.
Yes,
From
sir.
the Evening Degree College, welcoming everyone again on this Golden Jubilee time of the Degree College. I would like to thank Christina, President IFLA, and Shalini Madam from MYRA Institute, Mysuru, and Catharina Isberg from Sweden, who have participated and have given wonderful insight for the global standards in library science, which is the core topic of today's webinar, which is being conducted at Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. I would like to say that IFLA standards and other aspects was described by Catharina, the president of IFLA, which reflects the current consensus on rules, principles, guidelines, best practices or models for the particular activity or services, what she has described in her talk. I would like to also conclude that in the conceptual models like bibliography informations in objects, especially in orientation formulations, or bibliography information pertaining to serials and continuing resources are all in the aspects of the library which are coordinated to bring the conceptual models. At the same time, I just want to say that library reference models and standards are particularly given by the ISO information, that is international standard informations which are being proclaimed, and at the same other organizations also taking up this and improving tools in order to the context of the library science, which is important. In general speaking, not all libraries and information catalogs or centers get benefit from the library standards in the same way. For example, our rural libraries never come to the standards of the library. So it is very important to see that the digital libraries are not at all there in many parts of our country. So still lot of automation is required and lot of changes are yet to happen in our country. But at the same time, Catharina Isberg said about the best practices in the library, and she gave the guidelines what are to be followed from the international standards and how a global standards can be brought about, at least in the city areas or the digital libraries which are taken up in the city or the institutions which are following it. And from Shalini Madam wonderfully has described the digital library from the metadata aspect and how it can be segmented or how it can be bifurcated, how all standards can be placed or how categorization can be done, and how descriptive, structural and administrative metadata can be taken up. And with this, I just want to say that whatever the standards are there now, for the examples, the digital era and the software applications are also coming up in different libraries, and many softwares are coming. For example, in our own libraries, many of the COA or other softwares which are being applied are majorly playing a different role in our libraries. But metadata and other structures are a permanent for a much more bigger libraries, as MYRA Institute Madam was, Shalini Madam was telling, where the data is retrieved and stored in many of the sections of the library, which is not at all deleted. In our small institutions, we don't see that the data are stored in any particularity, but we just focus on the regular pattern of working. So these aspects are very much new to the concepts at the same time, which may be taken up in the coming days to store the data once the research and other abilities of the standards become much more higher when compared to today's lifestyle or educational updates which are happening. So I would like to thank for the foresight and the global standards which are being told by different participants or the persons who have come up, like Catharina Madam, Shalini Madam. I would like to thank the organizers, the principal SN Satish sir, and coordinators Sunil sir and Yoganath and Darapa, to see that much more standard publications or much more standard webinars are conducted with the institute. And thank you one and all for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for rendering the presidential remarks. I request Mukha S, 3rd BCom, to render vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It is my proud privilege to propose vote of thanks on behalf of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College on this occasion. At the outset, I thank MYRA School of Business, Mysuru, India, for associating with us to conduct this international webinar. I express our wholehearted thanks to Mackenzie, the President, International Federation of Library Associations. Thank you, ma'am, for your inaugural video. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to our theme speaker in her absence, Ms. Catharina Isberg, IFLA Governing Board Member and IFLA Division Chair, Library Director, Helsingborg City Libraries, Sweden, for rendering a theme talk on global standards and strategies in the daily library. I am humbled and grateful to you, ma'am. I would like to express our sincere thanks to Dr. Shalini, founder and chairperson, MYRA School of Business, for giving an excellent theme talk on metadata standards for digital libraries. Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable words. I express our sincere thanks to Sri W.T. Ashok sir, Honorary Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust, for rendering the presidential address. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My special thanks to our beloved young and energetic principal, Professor N.S. Satish sir, who is the robust of our Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank Dharappa Konna, Program Coordinator, Sunil Kumarji, Coordinator IQAC, who have helped us to materialize this webinar. I express our gratitude to all the principals, conveners, and members of our sister institutions and other colleges, academicians, research scholars, students, and delegates across the globe for participating in this webinar. I would like to convey our heartfelt gratitude to Seshadripuram Evening Degree College for giving us, the students, this special opportunity to host this international webinar. We will remain grateful to our teaching and administrative staff for their support. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you, one and all.
Yes. Thank you, madam. Shalini, madam. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am. Sunil, sir.